I remember the sky first. It was too wide. Not just big. No, not like the open fields we used to walk through back home, but endless. The kind of endless that makes your chest feel small. You look up, and suddenly you're nowhere, and nothing is around to catch you. They arrived with hope. Always hope. It glinted in their eyes like morning sun on a silver coin, warm at first, and then too bright. They had stories in their pockets, packed between dried fruit and paper maps. Dreams of gold, of open land, of a town with their name on it. Of a place where the sun always set just right and the saloons always had space for newcomers. But the Wild West wasn't waiting for them. It never waits for anyone. The first thing that went wrong was the silence. You'd expect gunshots, or laughter, or galloping horses. But there were hours where the only sound was the dry wind brushing through bone-colored grass. Silence that made your ears ache, like they were waiting for something that never came. Then the dust, always the dust. It crept into their boots, their eyes, their mouths. It wasn't the kind of dust you could brush off. It stayed. It whispered things they didn't want to hear. Things like, "You're too soft for this," or "You came for a story, but this land tells its own." They tried to fit in, bought the hats, learned the way the locals said, "Evening dot," walked with a wider stance, smiled slower, but the air never felt like theirs. The buildings looked at them like strangers. Even the horses didn't trust them. And the days were long. Unbearably long. The sun took its time here. It didn't rush like it did back east. It hung in the sky like it was watching, testing them. By noon, they were already tired. By sunset, they were ghosts. They tried one more morning. Woke before dawn. Boiled coffee on a crooked fire. Watched the world stretch open in pale pinks and quiet gold. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. By midday they were gone. Some said they took the north road. Some said they caught a train going anywhere but west. Some say the desert kept them, buried them in wind and time. But I think they just couldn't live a day in the Wild West. Not because they were weak. Not because they were foolish. But because the West doesn't bend for anyone. It waits for no story. It takes what it wants and forgets the rest. And now, when someone new comes into town, all wide-eyed and full of dreams, we tell them about the sky. We point to the dust. We say, "Try to last a day," because some don't even last until sundown. Some realize before the first star blinks above the prairie that this land isn't something you live in. It's something that lives through you. And if it doesn't choose you, well, you won't last the night. After they left, or faded, or folded back into the wind, however you want to say it, the town settled again. The chairs on the porch creaked like old voices. The bar doors stopped swinging. Even the sheriff, who used to keep a watchful eye on all newcomers, just let his hat slip lower over his eyes. No one really talks about them anymore. Not out loud. But when the dusk stretches long across the dirt road and the lanterns haven't yet been lit, you can almost hear their footsteps. Not hurried. Not panicked. Just unsure. shoes too clean, movements too careful, like people trying to dance to a rhythm they never quite heard. The Wild West has a rhythm, a slow, dragging rhythm, like an old song half remembered. You don't hear it with your ears. You feel it in the bones. It's in the sway of the saloon doors, in the crack of dry wood, in the way the wind pauses between gusts, like it's listening, too. They never learned it. That's what I think broke them in the end. They didn't listen long enough. Most folks come here thinking it's about bravery, drawing fast, riding hard, speaking loud. But really, the West prefers those who whisper, those who know when to wait, those who leave space between words, like the spaces between fence posts on a long, lonely trail. I remember one of them, the taller one, I think, used to write things in a little notebook. Sat out behind the inn, always trying to describe the sunsets, as if putting it into words could tame it. But you can't tame the West. You can only sit with it, quietly, and let it ignore you. That notebook is still there, behind the inn, half buried under dust and weeds. I opened it once. The pages were brittle, like dried leaves, and most of the ink had faded. But I could still read one line, written near the back. We thought it would feel like freedom, but it feels like waiting. That line stayed with me, because that's the secret. The West is freedom, but not the kind they wanted. It's not the freedom to chase what you want. It's the freedom to lose everything, and still wake up to another silent sky. Some don't want that kind of freedom. Some don't survive it. And that's why they couldn't live a day here. Not even one. There was a well behind the chapel, old, crooked, the rope frayed and the bucket rusted. No one drank from it anymore. Not because the water was bad, just because time had moved on and the well hadn't. But sometimes, when the wind dropped low and the whole town felt like it was holding its breath, the well whispered. Or maybe it was just the echo of things that had been said too quietly, too long ago. They say if you lean over the edge and listen, you don't hear water. You hear footsteps. You hear voices that were never loud enough to last. I think of them sometimes, the ones who couldn't stay. Not with judgment, not with sorrow, just stillness. Like the way a shadow thinks of the thing that cast it. Like a rock remembers the river that once shaped it. I remember the way they looked on their last night, their faces dim in the lamplight, not frightened, just tired in that way only the land can make you tired. It's a slow kind of exhaustion, not from running or work, but from being unwelcomed by the air itself. You don't belong here, not because you're not strong enough, but because the West doesn't care about strength. It only respects surrender, not the loud kind, not dramatic, but the quiet laying down of the self, the long exhale that says, I have nothing to prove to this place. They didn't know how to do that. They thought they had to fight the land. But you don't fight the sun, or the silence, or the stars. You let them pass through you. You become part of their forgetting. There's a certain hour here, always the same, when the wind stops completely. Not a breeze, not a rustle. Just still air, like glass. It lasts only a moment, but in that moment, You can hear everything you've ever tried to silence. All the fears you left behind in other cities. All the dreams you stopped believing in. That's the hour the West chooses you, or doesn't. That night, I saw them walking out past the last building, past the dry fence and the dead lantern. No horses, no farewell. Just that slow walk, like maybe if they walked slow enough, the land would change its mind. It didn't. By morning, their tracks were gone, wiped away by nothing more than dust and silence. And now, every morning, the town wakes the same. One less story, one more quiet truth. Some folks weren't meant to stay. Some hearts beat too fast for this slow world. Some hands need cities, clocks, noise. The Wild West doesn't hold grudges. But it doesn't hold on either. It lets go, even when you're not ready. There's a house on the edge of town, more of a shape now than a structure. The wood is gray and soft, the windows blank with dust. No one goes near it, not because it's cursed or haunted. Nothing so dramatic. It's just forgotten, like a page never read, like a promise no one made out loud. They stayed there once, just one night, maybe two. It's hard to say now. Time stretches here, folds into itself like old paper. There are no calendars on these walls, only the fading of light and the deepening of shadows. The room they slept in still smells faintly of tobacco and iron. If you stand still long enough, you can almost hear a match being struck, a breath drawn in, a sigh that never made it to words. The bed is still made, neatly, without fuss, as if they meant to come back, as if they just stepped outside for a moment and got caught in the long forgetting. Sometimes I sit on the front step, where the wood bends like an old man's spine. I watch the road curve out beyond the last tree, where the land turns flat and the sky swallows all color. I wait for something, not return, not regret. Just understanding, maybe. You see, not everyone leaves the Wild West. Some simply go quiet in it. They stop speaking, and the land speaks instead. It tells their story with fences that collapse in the wind, with boots left behind in barn corners, with chairs that rock, though no one's in them. It remembers without memory, holds without holding. And that's the hardest part, maybe. This place doesn't grieve. Back east, when someone leaves, people gather. They talk. They light candles, write letters, say things like, "Gone too soon." But here, the silence is its own answer. The land says they came. They tried. They left. And that's enough. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind is high and the stars blink like they're struggling to stay awake, I think I see their shadows. Not ghosts. Just the suggestion of presence, outlines of people who once thought they could stay. And I whisper to the dark, "I remember you," because no one else will. You stop noticing the days after a while. The sun still rises, low and dull at first, then harsh. The kind of light that doesn't warm, just exposes. It shows the cracks in the walls, the splinters in the floor, the empty chair across the table. I used to mark the days. scratches on the inside of the barn door. At first it was comforting, a rhythm, a measure. But one morning I walked out, looked at the marks, and couldn't remember what number I was on. Couldn't even remember why I started counting. That's when I knew the West had taken me too. Not my body, not my breath, but the part of me that thought time mattered. I remember them less clearly now. I try, but all the details blur. Was their coat blue or brown? Did they laugh loudly or only in small exhales? Did they cry once near the well? Or did I imagine that? Memory isn't solid here. It moves like the sand, buries things, unburies others. You can't trust it. You can only sit beside it, like you would a stranger, and hope it speaks kindly to you. The general store still carries their handwriting, a note left for credit. 2 tins of beans, 1 candle, matches. We'll settle later. Later never came. But the paper's still pinned there, yellow and curling. No one touches it. Not out of respect. That would imply we feel something so specific. No. It's more like superstition. Like the wind would change if we moved it. Like the silence would deepen in the wrong way. People ask sometimes, why didn't they stay? And I don't know how to answer anymore. They had everything they needed, shelter, food, clear skies, distance from their past. But that's the trick. The West doesn't test your needs. It tests your hollow places. It finds what's empty in you and echoes through it, until the echo is all that's left. They didn't fail here. They simply couldn't be here. There's a difference. One is about choice. The other, about listening too closely to the silence, and hearing something inside yourself answer back. Now, every so often, someone else comes through town. Wide eyes, clean boots, hope trailing behind them like perfume. They smile, ask for directions, ask if it's true, the quiet, the space, the freedom. And I say yes, it's all true, but stay one night, just one, and see what the dark has to say to you. Because the Wild West never shouts. It whispers, and not everyone should hear what it has to say. There's a sound the door makes when no one opens it. Not a creak. Not really. More like a tired breath, wood shifting in the heat, or the cold, or maybe just in its own memory of being needed once. That sound fills the saloons some nights. The kind of nights where even the moths are still, and the lamps burn low with no purpose but to hold back a little of the dark. I sit there sometimes. Not to drink. I stopped that long ago. The whiskey tastes like metal now, and the water like dust. I sit and watch the light flicker across the bar. Watch the shadows stretch longer than the room. Sometimes I see their shape again, leaning just so, elbow on the wood, face turned away. Not looking at anything. Just being. They always looked like they were waiting for something. Something they couldn't name. A letter, maybe. A sign. A sound in the distance that meant yes, you can stay. Yes, this land will keep you. But the West doesn't send signs. It only sends time. And time out here doesn't tell you anything. It just passes. Slow. Thick as molasses. Thin as smoke. I remember one of them, the quieter one, used to hum. Little tunes, nothing anyone knew. Just the kind of tune people make when they're trying to keep the silence from pressing in too close. It didn't work. The silence always won. Out past the ridge there's a tree. Only one. Crooked, with bark like old skin. Some say they carved their names into it before they left. Others say the marks were already there. Scratches left by the wind, or birds, or people long before any of us came. I went to see it once. Took me most of a day to walk there, and when I arrived, I couldn't find the names. Just grooves. Just lines. Like someone tried to say something but didn't know the language. Like the tree had listened, but didn't understand. I sat beneath it. Let the shade cover my boots. Closed my eyes. Tried to remember what it felt like to want something so badly you'd come all this way for it. And I couldn't. Not really. The West does that. It empties you, not cruelly, just gently, like the tide pulling back. Until all that's left is the shore and the shape of things that used to be there. They couldn't live a day here, not because they weren't strong, or brave, or willing, but because this place asked you to disappear, to dissolve, to let go of being seen, being named, being needed. And not everyone is ready for that. Even fewer can want it. The wind changed last night. Not much, just enough to bring the scent of dry grass and something older. Smoke, maybe, or ash, or memory. It came through the cracks in the walls, settled in the floorboards, curled beneath the door like a visitor too polite to knock. I lit a lamp, not because I needed the light, but because the dark felt full. And sometimes, when it gets that way, you want something between you and whatever's remembering you. I thought of them again. Not their names, those are gone now, like handwriting left in rain. But the way they stood, half in the doorway, half out of the world, like they never fully arrived, or never fully intended to. You can always tell the ones who won't last. They look around too much. They speak like they're asking questions. Even when they say things like, "We're staying," they sit with their backs to the room. The ones who belong here. They stop looking. They know there's nothing coming. No train. No letter. No rescue. Just this day. Then the next. Then maybe another. There's a sound I've only ever heard out here. It comes just before dawn. When the sky isn't light yet, but no longer dark. A soft creak. Like the land itself stretching. Like something waking up. Not because it wants to, but because it must. I wonder if they heard it. That last morning. Or maybe they were already gone by then. Swallowed by the flat horizon. Their shapes broken up by distance and dust. Some say they headed east. Some say west. But I think they just faded. Like footprints in dry earth. Here one moment. Gone the next. No sound. No sign. Sometimes I go out to the place where the road ends, just past the final fence post, where the brush grows high and indifferent. I stand there, and I wait. Not for them, I know better. I wait for the stillness. That quiet that's not quite silence. That breath before forgetting. Because this isn't a place you live in. It's a place that lives in you. If you let it. And not everyone can. There's a mirror in one of the abandoned rooms. The glass is cracked, not broken, just tired. The kind of crack that's grown slowly, over years. Like a river carving itself through something too old to resist. No one looks into it anymore. Not because they're afraid, but because the mirror doesn't reflect what's in front of it. It reflects what stayed behind. You glance into it, and maybe you see yourself, but not the you that walked in, the you that almost stayed, the version of you that the land wanted to keep. It's never smiling. They looked into it once. I saw them. Their face went still. Not afraid, not surprised. Just resigned. Like they saw something they already suspected. And after that, they stopped unpacking. Some say the West has no memory. But I don't believe that. I think it remembers everything. It just doesn't speak in the same way we do. It remembers in fences that lean the wrong way. In gates that swing even when there's no wind. In the way boots go missing. And show up weeks later, dry and standing. As if someone's still wearing them. This place. It gathers what's left behind. Not things. People. Parts of people. Their caution. Their hope. Their need to be witnessed. And then it folds those things into itself. Like old letters under floorboards. Never burned. Never read. Just kept. There's a drawer in the general store that sticks when you try to open it. No one forces it anymore. But I remember when it opened easily. Inside, there was a list. Names, dates, small items taken and owed. Their names were there, once. 2 lines. No signature. One day the list faded. Not aged, faded. The ink just thinned until it was gone. Even the pressure in the paper disappeared. Like the page had never been written on at all. That's what it's like to leave this place. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just undone. Like you were never here. And yet, sometimes I still set 2 cups on the table. Out of habit. Out of a memory that doesn't belong to me. One of them always liked their coffee black. The other took sugar, no milk. There's no sugar anymore. But I still leave the space for it. Just in case. No one's played it in years. The keys are chipped, the wood split down one side. But late at night, when the wind is steady and the town holds its breath, one note will ring out. Just one. Low and soft, like a question too tired to be answered. I never go to look. Not out of fear. But because I think, if I do, the sound might stop. And silence, once it finds its place again, doesn't let go easily. They used to sit there. Not to play. Just to rest. Fingers on the keys, not pressing, just touching. Like they were trying to remember a song they never learned. Something from before. Before this land. Before the dust. I remember the look on their face. That kind of stillness people wear. When they know a thing is ending but don't want to say it out loud. Not yet. Not while there's light. And the sun did shine, for a time. Mornings here could be beautiful. If you didn't look too closely. Golden. Quiet. The kind of quiet that lets you believe, for a minute, that maybe this is the start of something. But the West doesn't offer beginnings. It offers distance. And the illusion that distance is freedom. They tried. They tried to make it home. Hung a coat on the door. Swept the porch. Marked the days in soft pencil on the wall near the window. I saw those marks once, long after they were gone. Not numbers. Just lines. Each one softer than the last. As if they were running out of will to press down. There were only 7. 7 days. And on the 8th, nothing. Not even a final line. Just blank wall. Blank like the horizon. Blank like the sky before a storm. Blank like the space people leave behind when they go quietly. That's how it was. No bags packed. No note. Just absence. And a silence that fit the room like it had always belonged there. Now and then, a traveler passes through. They ask about the people who tried to stay. Ask why they left. Ask what happened to them. I always pause. Not because I don't know what to say, but because it doesn't matter. What happened is the same that always happens. The West didn't push them out. It just stood still and watched what they did with the silence. Some fill it with noise, some fill it with fear, and some they listen too closely and begin to vanish into it. There was a dog once, a small, scruffy thing that followed them for a time. Not a wild dog, but not quite tame either. More like a shadow that chose to walk beside them. They fed it scraps. Gave it a name, though it didn't seem to answer. It stayed close, watching. Sometimes it howled at the moon. Sometimes it disappeared for hours. One morning it was gone. No farewell. No tracks. Just an empty space where it used to wait. They looked for it. Called its name. But the dog was never found. Maybe it left because it could. Maybe it was never theirs at all. Maybe it was the only one who knew how to live here and leave again. Sometimes I think about that dog. About the quiet freedom it had. The way it vanished without a sound. Because that's the truth of this place. You can come. You can try. But the Wild West always has its own plans. It doesn't care about your hope. It doesn't care about your plans. It only cares about what stays behind. And what stays behind is always quieter. The night is a long one here. Longer than you think. Full of small sounds you almost don't hear. The scrape of a boot, the whisper of cloth, the sigh of a distant tree. They felt all of that. Every one of those moments. But they couldn't hold on to any of it. Not really. Because to live in the Wild West is to live without holding, to walk without footprints, to speak without voice. And that's why they couldn't stay. Not because they were weak, but because this land asks more than most can give. It asks for forgetting, for disappearing, for becoming part of the dust and the wind. The church is nothing now, just bones of wood and rusted nails, a roof sagging like the back of an old man, and windows with no glass, only wind. But the well is still there, covered with a flat stone, as if someone long ago decided the thirst wasn't worth it. Or maybe the water stopped answering. No one drinks from it now. No one asks why. But I remember the sound. The hollow knock when a pebble drops in. Bounces once, twice. Then falls into silence instead of splash. That's the kind of silence they couldn't bear. It's not just quiet. It's expectant. Like something is listening. Not with ears, but with presence. They once sat near that well. Late evening. Dust still in the air from a wind that had already moved on. They didn't speak much that night. Didn't move much either. I think something in them had already begun to leave. You can always tell when someone starts to fade before they go. It's in the way they stop reacting, how they stop watching the road, how their hands rest just a little too still on their knees. And then the next morning, they're gone. Their shadow stays a day or two longer. Maybe a shape in the window. Maybe a warmth on the porch step. But then even that goes. The West is not cruel. Not exactly. It just doesn't follow you when you leave. It lets go too easily. Like it never noticed you were here in the first place. Some say the wind carries memory out here. That it moves between the bones of the dead church. And the rails that never saw a train. Whistling songs that no one taught it. I don't know if that's true. But I've heard the wind speak in ways I can't explain. And once, just once, I heard it call a name I hadn't said in years. One of their names. And for a moment, just a moment, I almost turned back. Almost. But you learn quickly in the West. You don't follow echoes. You let them go. Or they take you with them. There's a coat still hanging on the nail near the door. No one wears it. No one dares to take it down. It's stiff now, the way fabric gets when time forgets softness. Dust lies on its shoulders like it belongs there. Like it's always been part of the coat. Part of the silence. I remember watching them hang it up. That first day. They did it slowly, deliberately. As if to say, I'll be back for this. But they weren't. And they didn't. No one ever takes the coat. Because out here, when someone leaves something behind, you let it be. You don't disturb it. You don't ask. Because out here, even forgotten things remember. The coat remembers the shape of their back. The way they sighed when they stepped in from the wind. The small clink of a button against the nail. A rhythm repeated only once. Sometimes I think that coat is waiting. Not for them. But for the right kind of wind. The kind that could lift it, carry it into the hills, where no one keeps time anymore. They tried to leave marks. A carved initial in the wood near the window. A broken cup they never threw away. Boot prints once, deep and clean after the rain. But even those marks fade. The wood swells and smooths over. The cup gathers dust and meaning. And the prints, they dry out, crack, and vanish into the thirsty earth. You can't live here. Not really. You can only pass through. No matter how long you stay. And that's the thing no one tells you about the Wild West. It isn't wild because of the danger, or the emptiness, or the guns, or the dust, or the silence. It's wild because it doesn't hold on. It lets you leave too easily. It lets you forget who you were. It lets you become nothing. Softly, gently, without resistance. That's why they couldn't make it. That's why they lasted less than a day. Because it takes a certain kind of person to sit in that much stillness and not come undone. Not because I need to, but because the land expects it. It likes the pattern of footsteps, the gentle repetition of weight on dust. It listens through the soles of your boots. The general store is still there, barely. The shelves sag inward, cans rusted shut, jars full of cloudy nothing. But the light still falls through the warped window at the same angle as it did when they stood there. I remember them turning one of those jars over in their hands, watching the dust inside settle, as if they expected it to tell them something. Maybe it did. They didn't say. The back room still smells of dry wood and something faintly sweet, like time left out too long. There's a ledger on the counter, the kind where someone once wrote in careful, slanted lines. Debts, purchases, a few names scratched out, a few circled. One line near the bottom reads simply, "2 passing through, paid in full." No initials, no dates, just that. And it's enough. Because this place doesn't care for the full record. It remembers in fragments. It remembers in feeling. At the edge of the town, there's a fence, or what's left of one. 3 wooden posts, a single strand of rusted wire. Nothing to keep in, nothing to keep out. But they stood there once, both of them, on either side of that line, neither speaking, neither moving, as if they knew that once they crossed it, something inside them would change. Maybe it already had, because you don't come here whole. No one ever does. You come frayed at the edges, with questions you pretend not to carry, and hopes you don't say out loud. They came like that, wearing silence like a coat too big for them, looking out at this place like it owed them an answer. But the West doesn't owe anyone anything. They tried to fix things, tried to build a shelf here, a step there, hung a blanket over the window, wrote things down on scraps of paper and folded them under stones. It all faded. Even the blanket, sun-bleached, tattered. It flutters now when the breeze passes through the empty room. A quiet flag for a country that no longer remembers its name. And in the evenings, when the sky sinks down like a tired eyelid, I sometimes think I hear their voices, not words, just cadence, the way voices sound when they're not trying to be heard, when they're only trying to last a little longer. They couldn't. Last, I mean. The Wild West didn't break them. It didn't chase them. It simply showed them who they were when there was nothing left to answer to. And that was the hardest part. Not the silence. Not the thirst. Not the long shadow of the sun crawling across the same boards every day. No. The hardest part was seeing yourself. Clearly. Without distraction. And knowing you couldn't stay. Some say the West is empty. But that's not true. It's full, too full. Of memory. And echo. And things we tried to leave behind. It's why they only lasted a day. Because you can't run from yourself here. Not when the land listens. Not when the wind remembers. Not when even the dust knows your name. The second morning was colder. Colder not in temperature, exactly, but in weight. The kind of cold that comes from inside. When silence settles in your chest and doesn't leave. They hadn't expected that. The first day had been dry, bright, almost golden. The kind of weather that tricks you into staying. But the second morning, it was as if the land had made up its mind. They hadn't spoken much the night before. Just a few words exchanged in that tired, end-of-day voice. The kind people use when they're too weary to pretend, but still too stubborn to sleep. The fire had died quickly. The wood here burns fast, too dry. Cracks and collapses into ash before you feel the warmth. And the stars overhead? Too many. Too sharp. As if the sky had more eyes than it needed. One of them sat up through the night, watching shadows move slowly across the floorboards, each hour longer than the last. Not afraid, not exactly, just unwilling to surrender. Because out here, closing your eyes isn't just rest. It's an act of trust. And they didn't trust the night yet. Didn't trust the wind that sounded almost like voices. Didn't trust the way the floor groaned under no weight at all. By morning, they were both still awake. Still waiting for something. A sound. A sign. A reason. The coffee they made was bitter. The tin cup too hot to hold at first. Then suddenly cold, like it had forgotten how to carry warmth. They didn't finish it. Instead, they wandered, separately, without speaking. One walked toward the barn that had no roof. The other stood at the fence line, staring out at the nothing beyond. There's a certain kind of quiet here that doesn't exist anywhere else. It's not peaceful, not soothing. It's the quiet of things that have already ended, but haven't finished being remembered. And they could feel it, in their bones, in the way their own footsteps seemed too loud, in the way the wind didn't push, just pass through them. By midday, the sun returned. But it felt wrong now. Unwelcome. Too high, too distant. Like a god that no longer cared to watch. They sat in the shade of the broken house, each lost in their own stillness. Flies moved through the air like lazy thoughts. The dust rose and fell without purpose. At some point they argued, but softly. The kind of argument that isn't about anything specific. Words like "you said" and "I thought" and "maybe we shouldn't have." But even the argument had no strength, no bite. Because the West doesn't fuel fire. It absorbs it, takes it into itself, and gives you back only silence. They spoke less after that. They tried chores, chopping what little wood remained, sweeping dust off a floor that only collected more, moving objects from one side of the house to the other, as if rearranging things would give them meaning. It didn't. The hours stretched. There is no time here, only light and shadow. And the light is always harsh, the shadow always too long. They ate cold beans from a can, shared a piece of bread that crumbled in their hands. Didn't speak. The dog didn't come back. They had hoped it would, but hope has no roots here. It drifts like tumbleweed, aimless, light, and soon forgotten. That evening, one of them took a walk out past the rocks, farther than they should have. The other watched from the window, but didn't call them back. Didn't ask why. Because out here, you don't question where people go. You only notice whether they return. They did, but something in their eyes was missing. Some flicker. Some anchor. They didn't speak about what they saw. Just lay down, hands folded under their head, eyes on the ceiling that creaked with the breath of night. The second night was longer. Nights are always longer after you realize you're not welcome. And they realized it then. Not because of danger. Not because of ghosts or beasts or sounds in the dark, but because of what the place had revealed. The way it held up a mirror not made of glass, but of silence. The kind of mirror where you see not your face, but your weight, your loneliness, your need to speak just to prove you exist. And they couldn't do it. They had planned to stay a week, had counted supplies, had measured time in cans and matches and tasks. But none of that mattered, because the West doesn't run on time. It runs on presence. And if yours isn't steady, if yours isn't rooted, then the land will not hold you. By morning, they didn't even speak of leaving. They simply gathered what little they had brought. A bag, a coat, a notebook never written in, and stepped off the porch together. The door creaked shut behind them, not in protest, not in farewell, just in closure. They didn't look back. Not really. Maybe once. Maybe not. Because some part of them already knew. Looking back would mean admitting something had been lost. And you don't lose anything here. It simply lets you go. They walked slowly. The sun rose behind them. But it didn't warm their backs. Ahead was nothing. No promise. Just distance. But even that felt like comfort after the stillness. Because that's the truth, isn't it? Some places are too honest, too quiet, too unwilling to lie to you about who you are. And that's why they couldn't last. Not because they were weak, but because they still needed noise, still needed walls that echoed, still needed mornings that brought with them sound and movement and meaning. Here, there's no such thing. Here, there's only space. And space. Space does not forgive. It does not explain. It does not grieve. It only continues. I stay behind. Not out of strength. Not out of belonging. But because I no longer needed the noise. The land took me in slowly. Not kindly. But clearly. And now I speak only when I must. Walk only when the ground forgets my weight. Breathe in time with the wind. I remember them sometimes. Not as people, but as motion. The way their shadows moved across the floor. The way their voices thinned out by the second night. The way they couldn't rest. Not really. And I understand. Most can't. The West asks a question no one is prepared to answer. Can you live without being seen? Most say yes. They lie. Because being seen is not just attention. It's confirmation. And out here you get none. No applause. No witness. Only the sound of your own breath. Until even that quiets. They didn't fail. They simply stopped. And that's the difference. The West doesn't destroy. It dissolves. You'd think that once they left, the house would feel empty. That something essential would vanish with them. Some warmth. Some noise. Some trace of human will. But no. The house simply returned to what it had always been. Not waiting. Not mourning. Just being. There were marks, yes. A bent nail where they tried to hang a lantern. A scuff in the floor from a dragged chair. The faint scent of soap that didn't belong here. But all of that faded. The wind came first. Soft, almost apologetic. It crept in through the cracks. Through the seams in the walls. Through the boards in the floor. It didn't remove what they left. It simply rearranged it. The cup rolled slightly to one side. The papers on the table lifted and fell. The blanket, still over the window, sagged just a little more. Dust gathered again in corners they had swept. And the light returned to its old angles, slanting through the broken glass the same way it always had. Like nothing had happened. Because here, things don't happen. They occur. They pass through. Like clouds. Like breath. Like visitors too delicate to name. Further down the trail, the boots they wore left impressions. Faint at first. Soft, shallow ovals in the earth. But the wind smoothed them. And the sun hardened the ground. And the night brought dew that blurred the edges. By the third morning, there were no footprints. Only soil. And by the fifth, not even the birds paused to look, because the land doesn't keep record. Not unless you offer something more than presence. And even then, even if you bleed or build or bury, it still forgets. Eventually, not with malice, but with rhythm. You see, memory here is not a straight line. It's a circle, a slow, ever-turning hush. The same wind, the same shadows, the same names whispered once and never again. People used to live here, long before the two who came and couldn't stay. families, drifters, men with sharp eyes and women with wide silence. They too left marks. You can still see them if you know where to look. A child's name carved into a tree stump. A spoon rusting beside a collapsed well. A pattern of stones that once formed a path, now scattered, like someone tried to walk away but forgot the direction. I walk past these remnants sometimes, not to remember, but to listen, to feel the way the past sits quietly under the surface, breathing through cracks in the dust. There's a place near the ridge, just beyond where the creek dries each summer, where a fire pit still holds its shape, blackened stones, ash sunk deep into the earth. No one has used it in years, and yet, when the wind passes over it, I swear I can smell smoke, not the smoke of destruction, but the smoke of waiting, of a story that never got to finish. Perhaps they sat there, too, the ones who came and left. Perhaps they stared into that same ring of stone, wondering if the fire would speak back. It never does. Not here. Do you know what silence sounds like? After 10 days alone in the West? It stops sounding like silence. It becomes breath. It becomes presence. It becomes so complete. You forget what it's like to hear anything else. No voices. No doors. No laughter echoing through hallways. Only birds. And wind. And your own thoughts growing quieter by the hour. That's when the land accepts you. Not when you build. Not when you speak. Not even when you stay. But when you dissolve into the rhythm of it. When you stop reaching for meaning. And simply listen to the hollow beat of nothing. That's why they didn't last. They still needed contrast. Still needed sound to remind them they were alive. But this place, it reminds you by erasing you, softly, gently, like sand covering a boot print, grain by grain. Sometimes I wonder what became of them. I don't imagine cities, or noise, or crowds. Those are too loud, too sudden, too full. I imagine a room with curtains, a clock that ticks, a mirror above a sink. I imagine one of them sitting quietly, remembering the way the sky looked when it had no end, the way the ground smelled just before dusk, the way the silence out here felt like it had teeth, and maybe they whispered to themselves sometimes. We were there, and maybe no one believes them, because the West doesn't follow you. It doesn't write itself into your story. It doesn't cling. It lets you go, so fully, so thoroughly, that even you begin to question if you were ever here at all. There's a rock I sit on when the wind picks up, flat, wide, warm in the afternoon, cold by dusk. From there, you can see the whole plain, all the way out to where the hills begin to forget themselves. I sit there in silence, always the same way, hands folded, eyes half-lidded, breath in time with the earth. And sometimes I think I hear them again. Not in words, not even in sound, but in absence, in the shape of the quiet. After a name has been forgotten, I do not speak their names anymore, not because I've let go, but because the land never asked for them. And I've learned not to offer more than what's needed. They left, and were left behind. At the same time, and the house remains, and the dust, and the stillness, and I remain, not because I'm strong, but because I've become part of the forgetting. The West didn't kill them. It didn't chase them off. Didn't burn them out. Didn't whisper threats or bury signs. It did something worse. It showed them who they were, when there was no one left to lie to, and they couldn't bear it. There was a sound once, early on, before they left. A soft clink, metal on enamel. A spoon stirring nothing in a cup. A sound too small to matter, yet loud in that hollow stillness. I remember it, not because it was meaningful, but because it was the last time they tried to make the world behave. That's what people do when they come out here. They bring their rituals, their ways. They stir empty cups. They sweep floors that only gather more dust. They speak words meant to fill time, as if time were hollow. But time here is not empty. It is full, so full it cannot hold anything else. And when people try to pour themselves into it, they overflow. They break. After they left, I didn't move for 3 days. Not in sadness, not in thought, but in alignment. The house returned to its rhythm, the wind to its wandering. The coyotes called again from the ridgeline, and I listened. Not like you listen to music, or conversation, or warning, but like a stone listens. Still, patient, receiving everything, and needing nothing. That's something they never understood. To live here, you must stop needing. No need for answers. No need for plans. No need for proof that you matter. The land doesn't care. The sky doesn't pause. The dirt doesn't remember. And in that indifference, there is peace. But only if you're quiet enough. Only if you stop measuring your presence by what reflects it. On the 4th day, I walked. Not far. Not fast. But deliberately. The kind of walking where each step is less about distance and more about weight. I passed the water trough, dry as always, the post where a rope once hung, the stump with the nails still bent at an angle. They had touched that nail, I think, tried to hang something, a lantern perhaps, or a thought. It didn't hold. Most things don't out here. I sat beside the barn, where the beams had collapsed long before them, watched ants rebuild their tunnels beneath a split board, watched a hawk draw wide, thoughtless circles in the sky, and I felt it again. That quiet, the deep, steady hum of nothing important, not boredom, not silence, but presence without need. That is the rarest thing, and the hardest to bear, because we are creatures of hunger. Hunger for sound, for story, for meaning, and the West offers none. It offers space, and in that space, Your hunger becomes echo, then whisper, then gone. I found one of their things later. A book, soft covered, warped from their brief reign. Unopened. There was no writing in it. No name inside. No creases on the spine. Just blank, dry pages. That made sense. Words don't survive here unless they're spoken softly. And only once. I left it where I found it. Under the edge of the floorboards. Near the wall where the shadow always lands by dusk. It will stay there, I think. Until the wind decides otherwise. That's how it works here. The world doesn't take from you. It simply waits until you stop holding on. One evening, long after they'd gone, I saw something strange. A line of deer, moving not across the land, but along it, as if they weren't crossing, but staying. I watched them for what might have been an hour, or more, or less. Time here bends. They walked in silence, hooves soft against dry earth, eyes forward, not alert, but certain. They knew something, not in words, but in rhythm, in how to walk without disturbing. And I thought, they belong, not because they try, but because they don't. They don't resist the silence. Don't fill it. Don't break it with explanation. They move as if they've never forgotten how to disappear. That's what broke the ones who came. They couldn't disappear. They carried too much shape, too many edges, too much noise in their souls. Even their stillness had friction. Even their sleep made sound. And out here, the land notices. Not with eyes, not with judgment, but with the weight of its refusal. Refusal to echo. Refusal to reflect. Refusal to prove you exist. That's why I whisper now. Even when alone. Even when no one is here to hear. Because raising my voice feels like stepping on sacred ground. And everything here is sacred. Only because it is forgotten. There's a tree past the north slope, split at the trunk, leaning slightly east. It's always quiet there. Too quiet, even for here. Birds do not nest. Insects do not linger. The grass doesn't grow thick around its roots. It is a place the land has paused. Not in fear, but in memory. I think someone died there once, long ago. Not violently, not tragically, just finally. The way a candle dies, when the room doesn't need light anymore. I sit there sometimes, and I don't think of them. Not exactly. I think of the absence they left. The way silence shifted around them. The way the dust no longer followed their feet. That's the true mark of departure here. Not what you leave behind, but what stops moving with you. Sometimes I forget my own voice. Not from age, not from sorrow, but because it no longer matters. There's no one to speak to, and nothing to be said. Words would only shape the stillness, and I've come to love it unshaped. The house stands. The door remains unlatched. The dust gathers in honest patterns, and I breathe. Not deeply, not loudly, but fully. I eat what grows. I sleep when the wind softens. I wake when the sky brightens from gray to gold. Then back again. I don't count days. They pass without needing to be named. And I don't wait. Because nothing here is coming. And nothing is gone. There is only here. Only now. Only this unending hush. That wraps around the bones like a second skin. And teaches you not to need more than breath. They couldn't stay. And I don't blame them. The West doesn't ask for loyalty. It only offers clarity. And most people, when faced with clarity, run. Because clarity strips away everything, except the truth of your own weight. And their weight was too loud, too human, too hopeful. And hope out here is like water in a broken cup. You carry it, but it never lasts. I remember the sound of their boots. Heavy, uneasy, like they didn't trust the ground beneath them. The West hears that, not in the way people hear, but in the way the land tilts ever so slightly, away from those who doubt it. They walked hard. They walked like they wanted the land to notice them, to respect them, to yield. But the land doesn't yield. It never has. It just waits. And when the feet grow tired, when the shoulders ache, when the hunger becomes too loud to ignore, that's when the West leans in, not to punish, but to ask, are you done yet? Because only in surrender do you begin to belong. On the 10th night, they tried to light a fire. The wood was too dry, the wind too stubborn, the matches cheap and quick to die. I watched them from the shadow of the shed, not hiding, just present. They didn't see me. People rarely see the land. Once their own fear begins to speak, they argued in low voices. One wanted to give up. The other wanted to try again. I remember that tone. Not hope, not despair, but the brittle place in between, where decisions grow sharp. Eventually, the fire caught. For a while, it flared, briefly golden, then shrank into a flicker, and died with a sigh, as if even flame had no strength to stay. They went inside, closed the door against the wind. That didn't care if it entered. They didn't talk after that. And in the morning, they were gone. I found a sock 2 days later, tangled in brush near the edge of the arroyo. Small, gray, soaked with dew. It didn't belong to this place. Its fibers too soft. Its stitching too neat. I picked it up, held it in my hand, like a memory I hadn't asked for. Then I set it down again, not from indifference, but from understanding. Here, even memories must be allowed to vanish. There's a hill that never changes. It sits beyond the south fence, bare except for one bent fence post, and the echo of something once built there. People say there was a lookout tower, long before anyone now alive can recall. But the land says otherwise. There's no foundation, No scrap of wood, no rusted nail, only the suggestion that something once stood. That's how forgetting works out here. Not by erasing, but by softening, by letting the edges of history blur until they resemble the shape of sleep. When the wind grows still, there's a sound beneath it. Not quite a hum, not quite silence. It's the breath of the earth itself. Steady, unhurried, indifferent. It's the sound that comes when all other sounds have left. And once you hear it, you stop needing other voices. You stop asking the sky for answers. You stop carving initials into trees, or talking to yourself just to fill the air. You begin to speak in pauses, in steps, in the shape of your shadow across empty soil. Sometimes I find things buried shallow in the dirt. Not relics, not treasures, just remains. A spoon, a strip of cloth, a piece of glass, with sunlight caught in its edges. Each one held once by someone who thought they'd stay. But staying isn't about building. It's about ceasing to need shelter. Out here, the strongest homes are the ones made from silence. No walls, no locks, no roof to fall in, only the trust that the sky will not fall and the ground will not betray you. They never reached that trust. They stood with their backs hunched, always bracing against something that was never coming. And so, in time, they became ghosts before they left. And the land, patient as always, let them go. I watched the moon rise last night, not because I needed light, but because it rose the same way it always does. Without ceremony, without change, without apology. The moon here doesn't reflect you. It just exists. And in that consistency, there is a kind of mercy. They didn't understand that. They wanted signs, omens, some signal that their struggle mattered. But the only sign the West gives is survival. And even that, it offers in silence. There is no map for a place like this. Not a real one. You can draw the ridges, sketch the riverbeds, mark the old mining roads that vanish into gravel. But none of that is the place. The real West, the one that breaks people, exists between those lines. It's not land. It's not history. It's weight. Weight without shape. Time without mercy. Silence that doesn't echo. They came with maps. Crinkled papers clutched in hopeful hands. Lines drawn by men who never heard the way dusk settles. When the wind leaves the canyons, they traced those maps with fingers soft from city water. Pointed to places they'd never seen, called them homesteads, called them theirs. But nothing out here is yours. Not truly. You don't own the dirt. You borrow it. You don't conquer the distance. You get swallowed by it. And when you leave, if you leave, the dust covers your name, as if it was never spoken. I remember the morning they tried to name the hill. The one to the east, shaped like a shoulder blade. It catches sun early, warms before the valley does. They stood there, two of them, arguing softly. She wanted to call it Prospect Point. He said that was foolish. They went back and forth for a while, never once asking the hill. Eventually, they settled on nothing, called it that ridge, until the day they left. As if naming had to matter, to be worth doing. Out here it doesn't. The land doesn't listen, and the names don't stay. The wind takes them, one syllable at a time, carries them into the sky, where no one is waiting. You learn to let go of words here, not all at once, but slowly, the way a stream dries out in summer. First, you stop talking to yourself. Then, you stop thinking in full sentences. Then, even your memories grow quiet. It's not forgetting. It's shedding. Like bark from a tree. Like shadow from a stone. And underneath, something simpler remains. Something older. The knowledge of when to stand still. The sense of which wind means dust, and which means cold. The sound of water too deep to see. They didn't want that knowledge. They wanted stories, wanted victories, wanted to write something down and send it home. But there is no story here, only duration, only whether you last or don't. One night, long after they'd gone, I heard the coyotes sing in a pattern I hadn't heard before. 3 short barks, a long, low howl, then silence, then again. 3, 1, stillness. They were talking, I think, not in words, but in code. Not about prey, but about presence. Who is still here? Who has moved? What remains unchanged? The coyotes always know. They knew when the newcomers arrived. They knew when the woman tried to light a fire with damp grass. They knew when the man cried behind the lean-to. After the second water barrel cracked in the sun, and when they left, the coyotes were the first to walk the path they'd taken, sniffed their steps, confirmed their absence, then sang that new pattern, as if to write the names of the gone, into the night air, and the wind, merciless and kind, carried the message forward. Sometimes I dream of fences, not the ones built by hands, the old ones, the ghost fences, lines that no longer hold shape, wood sunk halfway into dust, wire curled like veins under sun-bleached stones. These fences still believe they serve a purpose, still lean in one direction, as if stopping things that have long since moved on. The ones who came tried to mend a section of fence, 3 posts and a strand of barbed wire. They worked on it for hours, sweat on foreheads, shirts tied at the waist, hands blistered by tools they barely understood. I watched from the porch. They never asked why the fence had fallen, only how to make it stand again. That was their mistake. They wanted to fix what the land had already released. Out here, decay is not a failure. It's a permission. Permission to let things end. And once something ends, you don't bring it back. You bury it with silence. I found a tin cup near the spring one morning. Old, dented, its handle half rusted away. I held it for a long time, not because it meant something, but because it didn't. It was just there, like the rock beside it, like the shadow of the pinyon tree, stretching over dry stone. I didn't take it. I left it where it was, because out here, to move something is to disturb its rest. And everything here deserves to rest. Even the things that once tried to matter. They never saw the storm coming. That was the worst part. They thought the sky was endless, benevolent, a canvas for sunsets and dramatic clouds. But the sky here is a mirror. It shows you back to yourself. And when the self is confused, hopeful, unready, the sky turns cruel. The wind came first, cold and low, like breath under a door. Then the dark, thick, fast. They tried to light the lantern. It failed. They tried to huddle by the canvas tent. It collapsed. They tried to hold each other, but the cold took their grip. I watched from the edge of the bluff, wrapped in an old coat, still as the rocks around me. I didn't move, not to help, not to warn, because there's nothing to be done. Once the West decides to speak, it speaks in dust, in hail, in thunder that doesn't echo, but settles. And after the storm passed, the silence was deeper than before, as if something had been removed and not replaced. They left the next morning, or maybe the one after. It doesn't matter. Only the absence matters, and the way it settled into the bones of the house, like it had always been there. There are no clocks here. Time is measured in shadows, in the slow crawl of light along the floorboards, in the soft shift of wind at dusk, in the way birds go quiet. Before the dark has truly arrived, they brought watches, 3 of them, one gold and heavy, inherited, one digital, with alarms for meals and medications, one slim and silver, worn like jewelry. By the end of the first week, they'd stopped checking them. By the second, they forgot to wind them. By the third, they didn't know where they were anymore. That's what happens. The land removes what you think you need. Not cruelly. Not all at once. Just enough. Each day. Until you can't remember why it ever mattered. Time doesn't pass here. It deepens. The well never ran dry. That surprised them. They expected scarcity, expected crisis. They came prepared for disaster, but not for monotony. Water that was always just enough, sky that was always too wide, wind that never stopped, but never said anything new. That's the real challenge. Not drought, not fire, but repetition, the sameness. Every day, the same hill, the same trail of ants along the porch rail, the same coyote prints in the same dust. It wore on them, not like pain, but like erosion. Small, invisible, unstoppable. They tried to make a game of it once. A notebook. Ruled lines. They wrote observations. Gave names to trees. Marked the weather. For 4 days they made lists. By the 5th, the notebook was gone. Not stolen. Just no longer where they'd left it. They didn't ask me. They didn't ask the land. They just looked around. Quietly. Like people who suspect they are not alone. They weren't. But not in the way they feared. They were never alone. But neither were they accompanied. They were watched. By the sky. By the insects. By the mountain. That refuses to crumble. That is the company you keep out here. Impersonal. Immense. Patient. The sun here doesn't rise. It arrives. One moment, the horizon is bruised. The next, it bleeds gold. No warning. No pause. And when it comes, it takes everything with it. Shadows. Secrets. The last breath of the cold. They never adjusted to it. Every morning was too bright. Too sudden. She squinted against it. He shielded his eyes with the flat of his hand. I watched them try to control their surprise, as if being prepared made it more bearable. But the West doesn't reward preparation. It rewards surrender. You don't beat the morning. You receive it. Face open. Hands empty. Heart still. One evening, they built a circle of stones. A fire pit. Careful, tidy. Like something they'd seen in a magazine. They didn't light a fire that night. Just looked at it. Pleased by its shape. By its potential. But out here, shape means nothing. Only use. Only survival. By the 3rd night, the stones had shifted. One had sunk into the dirt. Another cracked in half. Split by the pressure of heat and time. They blamed the wind. Blamed the weight of the logs. They didn't blame the truth. That nothing out here holds form. Unless it's been tested. 1,000 times. They hadn't tested anything. They decorated survival. Mistaking structure for substance. But the land doesn't care how things look. Only whether they last. And most things don't. They talked less as the days went on. Words grew heavier. More expensive. By the end, their sentences were just fragments. Half-thoughts. Unfinished gestures. Did you? Could we? Maybe later. But out here there is no later. There is only now. And not speaking becomes its own language. I understood them better in their silence. Saw their decisions before they were made. Felt the tension between them. Like a fence pulled too tight between tired posts. They wanted different things. She wanted to prove something. He wanted to escape something. Neither knew how to be still. And stillness is the first lesson. The only lesson. Until you can stand motionless in the shadow of a tree and let the wind pass through you. You haven't arrived. You're just visiting. And the land knows the difference. One day, they found the bones. Coyote, maybe. Or dog. Long scattered. Sun-bleached. arranged by the wind and time. She gasped. He crouched beside them, touched one, said nothing. They didn't bury them, didn't move them. That was good. That was right. Some things are meant to be left as they are. Reminders, perhaps, not of death, but of continuity. That something lived, and ended, and left no story behind. Only outline, only absence shaped like form. That's all any of us leave. I saw them the last morning, their packs too full, their boots too clean, their faces too pale for people who'd known this dust. They looked back once, not at me, at the house, at the hill, at the place that never asked for their names. Then they walked, not quickly, not with fear, but with that quiet kind of resolve people get when they've decided to stop pretending. And as they left, the sky didn't change, the wind didn't pause, the ground didn't mark their steps, because the land doesn't need to remember you, to have held you. It only needs you to have listened, even once, and they had, just not enough. I don't count days anymore. Nothing really changes here. Or so it seems. You might think the sky shifts. The wind carries new scents. The shadow of the rock on the porch moves slightly. But that is not change. It's repetition. The endless cycle of silence. The same quiet, warmth in. There is no hope here. No promise. Only motion. And it leads nowhere. When they came, they carried words. Many words. Words for the future. For trying. For hoping. Now those words lie scattered in the emptiness. Stretched and scattered by the wind. And I remain. Not by strength. Not by will. Simply by not vanishing. Simply by staying. Because nothing else happened. This cabin no longer feels built. It seems to have grown out of the earth. Dust on the floor no longer separates from the wooden planks. The nails rust not from water, but from time itself. Yet the walls still hold. The corner leans crooked. The ceiling sags. But it holds the silence. It holds me. That is enough. I sit on a bench that was once part of a table. Probably when hot meals were cooked. When someone still thought about spices. Recipes. Warmth in a spoon. Now I eat what does not spoil. Dry. Flavorless. Food you don't remember. Because here, you do not remember. On the contrary, here, everything demands forgetting. I have learned not to ask what comes next. Because, next, here means just another day, like the last. This is not indifference. It is a way to survive. Those who seek meaning in every minute, they do not last here. They break fast. Because there is no meaning here. There is only space. That gives no answers. And asks no questions. You simply exist. Sometimes you stand. Sometimes you sleep. Sometimes you look into the distance. And if you are lucky, you forget what came before. Snow does not stay here. When it falls, quiet, weightless, it seems not to touch the ground, but it vanishes within a minute, as if ashamed to be present. And I know that feeling. I have learned to be light, minimal. My voice is no longer sound, just thought. And thought is no longer a sentence, but observation. And observation is no longer conclusion, but a shadow of what once needed meaning. I saw them when they still tried, washing clothes, counting supplies, trying to live somehow. They did not understand that here, life is not about trying. It is about letting be. They wanted control, wanted order, wanted a story they could tell. But the land offers none, only presence, only waiting, only the soft, endless unraveling. I remember the nights, how they stared at the stars, hoping for signs, for something to hold on to. But stars are not promises. They are witnesses, cold, distant witnesses, to the slow fading of hope. No constellation cares for your name. No comet bends its path for your wishes. The sky has no memory. It does not remember you. It does not expect you. You are a breath, a flicker, a passing shadow. I have no story to tell, no victory to claim, no lessons learned or wisdom gained, only the slow acceptance, the quiet acknowledgement of loss, that here in this place they could not live a day, because living means more than breathing, more than moving, more than hoping. Living means belonging, being part of the pulse of the land's endless song. They were guests who forgot the tune. They spoke in words that carried no weight. They carried fire but did not feed the earth. And so the land took them back, softly, silently, without rancor. The wind still moves. It hums a low, steady note, like a lullaby for things that cannot stay. I listen. I breathe. I let the dust settle on my skin, and in that stillness, there is a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of victory, not the peace of escape, but the peace of knowing you are part of something larger than yourself, something indifferent, unchanging, eternal. If you want me to keep going, to drift further into this quiet place, just say the word. This silence holds many stories, or perhaps no stories at all, only endless dust, and the patience of stone. They say the land here is unforgiving, but it is not anger that rules these plains. It is indifference, a stillness so vast it swallows hope whole, not with malice, but with absence. A silence so deep you forget what noise even means. I watch them come, carrying more than their packs, carrying their expectations, carrying voices from faraway places, voices that spoke of freedom, fortune, and a new life. But this land does not answer. It does not welcome. It does not promise. It merely waits. And waiting is the hardest thing to endure. Not the heat, not the cold, not the thirst, but the endless waiting for something that will never come. Days bleed into nights without distinction. The sun rises and falls in a slow, deliberate rhythm. It does not rush. It does not hurry. It simply moves, like a great, silent clock that keeps no time for anyone. They tried to catch the moments, captured the light on their cameras, jotted down notes in fading journals, made plans they never followed. Plans, like fragile glass, easily shattered by dust and wind. I learned to watch the dust. Dust is patient. Dust remembers everything and forgets nothing. It settles on forgotten things, on broken promises, on the footprints that fade but never disappear. Their footprints are still here. Faint outlines pressed into the earth. Lines drawn by feet that never found steady ground. They moved quickly, unsteady, afraid to stop. Because stopping meant surrender. But surrender was the only way to stay. The nights stretched long and empty. Stars watched silently overhead. Cold light falling on dry earth. No comfort, only witness. The wind sings its endless song. A mournful tune without words. A lullaby for the lost. I try to listen. Try to learn the language of absence. But silence is not a language. It is a void. And the void does not answer back. I have no stories of triumph. No tales of victory or escape. Only the slow fading of those who tried. Those who could not stay. They came with hearts full of fire, left with ashes in their hands. And the land took it all, without haste, without judgment. Sometimes I imagine what they thought, what passed through their minds in those final hours. Did they regret? Did they wish for something simpler? Did they find peace, or only despair? I do not know. And maybe it does not matter, because in this place, no one escapes themselves. No one outruns the endless, quiet waiting. I watch the horizon, empty and vast, a canvas painted in shades of dust and light. No roads lead away, no paths return, only the slow breathing of the land, and the quiet footsteps of those who have left. I close my eyes, breathe in the stillness, feel the dust settle in my lungs, and in the silence, I find a strange kind of peace. Not the peace of victory, but the peace of acceptance. To live here, to stay, means to give up the fight, to become part of the land's endless song, a whisper in the wind, a shadow on the dust. I don't count the days anymore. The sky remains the same dull stretch above, endless and pale, barely changing from dawn to dusk and back again. The wind moves with no urgency, a slow whisper that carries dust and the faint scent of dry earth, as if trying to remind you that this place is eternal and indifferent. They came here carrying dreams and words, full of hope and fire, but the land held no promises, only silence. No one lives here for long because the ground beneath their feet refuses to be conquered, and the sky above refuses to remember them. Their footsteps are quickly swallowed by the sand, their voices lost in the endless quiet, their plans fading like the sun behind the distant hills. What remains is only the slow passage of time, the weight of stillness that presses down like the heavy sky at noon. Life here is not about movement or struggle, but about quiet endurance, a slow dissolving into the land itself, becoming dust and shadow. No victories, no escapes, only the patient waiting that erodes the will and consumes the fire. It is not cruelty, but absence, a vast emptiness that asks no questions and gives no answers. To stay here means to give up trying, to surrender the need for meaning, to accept that this place demands nothing from you except your quiet presence. The stars watch without judgment, cold and distant, and the wind sings an endless mournful song that no one can understand. Those who came to tame this land never understood that it is not something to be tamed, but something to be borne silently, like a breath held until it fades. And so they left, one by one, their spirits broken by the weight of waiting and the endless horizon that swallowed all hope. And I remain, not by choice, but by inertia, a shadow among shadows, a whisper carried by the wind, part of the dust that never settles. This is the truth of why they could not live a day in the Wild West. Because here, living means more than just surviving. It means belonging to something vast and silent that cannot be grasped or controlled, only accepted. The sun rises slowly, dragging its light across the cracked earth, but it brings no warmth to the soul, only the relentless exposure to the elements, the heat baking the skin, the dust coating every surface, the dryness creeping into the lungs, reminding that here survival is a constant negotiation with an indifferent environment. No friendly faces greet you, no comforting sounds. Only the hollow wind that sweeps through empty canyons and forgotten trails, carrying away the voices of those who once dreamed but never stayed, and those who tried to hold on to hope find it slipping through their fingers like grains of sand, no matter how tightly they clutch, because this place demands a different kind of strength, not of muscle or fire, but of quiet endurance. The ability to sit with silence and wait without expectation, to let go of the yearning for meaning or escape, to become a part of the endless dust and sky, which knows no memory, no forgiveness, and no mercy, and in this stillness, the weight of loneliness grows heavy, a pressing emptiness that settles in the bones, making every breath a reminder of isolation, every heartbeat a pulse against the vast emptiness that surrounds, and those who cannot bear this slow erasure, this fading into nothingness, falter quickly. Their steps grow unsteady, their eyes lose focus, their voices fall silent, swallowed by the land that neither loves nor hates, only exists. Indifferent and eternal, waiting patiently for all stories to end, and all fires to die out. This is the harsh truth hidden beneath the myth of freedom and opportunity, that the Wild West was not a place to be conquered but a place where the spirit is tested by absence itself, and most fail not because of danger from others but because they cannot survive the absence of everything they took for granted. Comfort, companionship, certainty. And so they leave, disappear into the dust, forgotten by time and sky, and those who remain learn to embrace the silence, to breathe in the stillness, to find peace not in victory but in surrender, in becoming part of the land's slow, endless song. There is no rush here, no urgency in the turning of the earth or the movement of the wind. Days blend seamlessly into nights, and nights fold quietly back into days, like waves on a shore that never cease. but never change the shape of the land. The sun rises and sets without fanfare, casting long shadows over broken fences and abandoned homesteads where once people lived with hope. But that hope has since crumbled like dry clay, leaving behind only the memory of effort and loss, like footprints that fade under the relentless wind. Those who arrive often carry the weight of stories and dreams from distant places, but the land strips them bare, removing every false comfort until all that remains is raw existence, stripped of narrative, stripped of purpose. Only the slow act of enduring, breathing, waiting without expectation, for time to pass or perhaps to forget, because here, forgetting is both punishment and salvation, a letting go of the past and the future into a void that holds neither regret nor anticipation, only the present moment stretched thin into infinity, a thin thread of awareness in a vast silence that swallows everything. And the people who came with fiery hearts and loud voices find themselves silenced, their fires smothered not by enemies or storms but by the emptiness itself, which is the fiercest adversary of all, patient and unyielding, wearing down resistance until all that is left is acceptance, not triumphant, not joyful, but resigned, a quiet nod to the land that asks nothing and gives nothing, demanding only that you become part of its endless cycle, a fleeting dust mote drifting in the endless expanse of sky and earth, with no story to tell and no name to remember, and so they vanish, swallowed by the silence, leaving behind only echoes of their brief passage, and the land remains, unchanged and unchanging, a vast canvas of dust and light where no one truly lives, only fades away, and I am here still, a witness without words, a breath without sound, part of the endless waiting that is both curse and home. Sometimes I wonder if they ever understood what awaited them here, not the wild freedom they dreamed of, not the roaring adventures or the shining gold, but the slow unraveling of everything they held dear, the quiet erosion of hope and strength beneath an unyielding sky and an endless horizon that offered nothing but stillness. They came with plans and purpose, with courage and defiance, but this land asks for none of that. It asks only for presence, for the surrender of the restless heart, for the quiet acceptance of being utterly alone in the vastness, surrounded by emptiness that is neither friend nor foe, only a patient witness to the fading of all dreams. I saw them struggle against the silence, raising voices that echoed only briefly before being swallowed by the wind, trying to fill the void with stories and songs, with fire and motion. But the land does not respond to noise or fire, it only waits, indifferent and eternal, and those who cannot become part of its endless breath fall away, their strength spent, their minds unmade, their bodies claimed by dust and time. Here, survival is not about fighting or winning, but about surrendering without losing oneself completely. A fragile balance between presence and disappearance, between remembering and forgetting, where even memory becomes a burden too heavy to bear. And I have learned to listen not to what is spoken, but to what is left unsaid, to the slow rhythm of dust settling, to the distant howl of wind that carries no meaning but holds everything, to the quiet beating of a heart that no longer hopes, only endures. And in this endurance, there is a strange kind of peace, not the peace of triumph or escape, but the peace of becoming a small, silent part of something vast and unmoving, a breath held in the endless quiet, a shadow fading into dust beneath a sky that has no memory. The nights stretch endlessly here, each one a slow, heavy blanket of darkness that presses down on the soul with quiet insistence. The stars above cold and distant, indifferent witnesses to the fleeting lives beneath them. I watch as shadows lengthen and merge, the shapes of forgotten buildings and worn-out fences blending into the dust. And in that blending, there is a truth too vast to hold, that here, everything returns to nothing. And the passage of time is measured not in moments of joy or sorrow, but in the slow disappearance of presence itself, a fading away into the silence that is the only constant companion in this land. Those who arrived with dreams found only the hard lesson that hope is fragile here, easily broken by the relentless stillness that swallows sound and light alike. And so they moved quickly, restless and afraid to pause. But it was the pause they feared most. The still moment when the emptiness creeps in and the heart realizes that there is no place to belong, no story to carry forward, only the slow fading into dust and memory. And I have watched this unraveling, this quiet surrender, with a stillness that has no end, for in this place, even time seems to lose its hold, stretching thin and then slipping away like water through fingers, leaving behind only the patient breath of the land, a breath that holds no grudges and no regrets, only the endless, empty waiting that is both curse and home. Here, life is not about noise or movement or struggle, but about becoming part of the vast silence, learning to breathe without expectation. And in that learning, discovering a strange peace, not one born of triumph, but of acceptance, a surrender to the slow and steady unraveling that is the true spirit of the Wild West, a place where those who could not live a day simply vanished, leaving behind only dust, shadow, and the patient sky that remembers nothing. The horizon never ends here. It stretches out beyond sight, a vast ribbon of emptiness that feels both imprisoning and free, a paradox that confounds those who come seeking adventure or escape. For the freedom found in this endless space is not one of choice but of inevitability, a quiet surrender to the land's indifferent embrace, where the wind carries no news and the ground yields no comfort, only dust that clings to skin and soul, reminding that here, existence is fragile and fleeting, a whispered breath caught between heartbeats, and those who could not endure even a single day found themselves swallowed by the silence, their stories erased like footprints on shifting sands, leaving no trace but the faintest echo in the still air. And I remain, not out of strength or will, but as part of the land itself, a shadow among shadows, a breath of dust in the patient wind, listening to the slow, unending song of absence that fills this place. A melody without notes or words, only the steady pulse of time unraveling into nothing, teaching that living here means more than just survival. It means surrendering to a greater emptiness, becoming one with the vast, silent expanse, and finding peace not in resistance or escape, but in the quiet acceptance of being utterly alone, utterly small, utterly a part of something eternal and unchanging. I think about the faces that came here, the eyes full of dreams and fire, the hands that reached for something more than mere survival, only to find that here, the land does not reward ambition or courage but demands quiet endurance, a slow dissolving into the dust and wind where even the brightest hopes are ground down by endless waiting and silence that presses on the spirit like a heavy stone. And I wonder if they ever understood that this place asks not for struggle or defiance, but for the acceptance of absence itself, a surrender to the void that holds no hatred, no mercy, only the patient stillness of time itself, which erases all but the faintest traces. And those who could not live a day here were those who could not give up the need for certainty, for connection, for meaning, things this land offers only in whispers, in the spaces between the wind's sighs and the settling dust, where even memory fades into a slow, quiet forgetting, and in this forgetting there is a strange kind of peace, a letting go of the self into the vast emptiness that holds everything and nothing, where life and death are not opposites, but parts of the same endless cycle. And I listen to the silence, feel it settle around me like a second skin, and know that this is why they could not live here. Because living here means becoming part of the endless quiet, a breath held long enough to fade away. A shadow lost beneath an eternal sky that watches but never remembers. The dust is everywhere, in the air, in the cracks of the earth, clinging to skin and clothes, settling in the corners of abandoned cabins and rusted wagons. It is the slow reminder that nothing here stays, that everything is temporary, fleeting like a breath that slips away before you can hold it. And this dust does not discriminate. It covers the rich and the poor, the brave and the frightened, those who arrived with dreams and those who came to escape them, slowly erasing the sharp edges of memory and hope, until all that remains is the quiet hum of emptiness, the soft whisper of the wind across barren fields. And in this vast, unchanging landscape, the idea of living becomes strange and distant, replaced by the endless task of simply being present in the face of absence, feeling the weight of silence press down like a cold hand on your chest, learning that strength here is not in action but in stillness, not in conquering but in yielding, and those who could not live a day in this place were those who could not bend to its quiet demands, who fought against the slow fading instead of embracing it, who sought meaning where there was none, and so they left or disappeared, swallowed by the relentless dust and wind, leaving behind only the faintest traces of their passage. And I stay, a witness without voice, a shadow without shape, part of the land's slow breath, forever caught in the endless waiting that is both curse and salvation, a reminder that to live here means to become dust, to become silence, to become part of the wild West's eternal, unforgiving song. There is a strange beauty in this emptiness, if you look beyond the harshness and the dust, a beauty in the endless sky that stretches like a pale canvas, untouched and vast, where the stars burn cold and distant, silent witnesses to the slow unraveling of dreams and the fading of voices that once spoke with hope and fire. But here, under this indifferent sky, hope becomes fragile, easily broken by the relentless stillness that swallows sound and light, leaving behind only the soft echo of footsteps fading into the dust, a whisper of life barely heard before it slips away. And I wonder what it means to live when life itself seems to dissolve into absence, when presence is a fleeting thing, held only for a moment before it vanishes like a shadow at dusk, and those who could not stay, those who could not live even a day here, were the ones who feared the silence most, who could not bear the weight of solitude and the endless horizon that promises nothing but quiet waiting. And yet, in this waiting, there is a lesson, a teaching about surrender, about the acceptance of things beyond control, about becoming part of a vast, unchanging whole that knows no hurry and no anger, only the slow, steady breath of time itself, which carries away all resistance and leaves behind the stillness, the dust, and the patient sky that watches without judgment or memory. And I remain here, breathing in that stillness, feeling the dust settle like a second skin, a quiet witness to the reasons why living here is not a triumph but a slow fading, a quiet acceptance, and ultimately, a letting go. The wind moves like a slow breath across the barren plains, carrying with it the weight of countless stories left unfinished, voices that tried to rise above the silence but were folded back into it by the endless space and the dust that never settles. In this place, time loses its sharp edges, becoming a blur that stretches on, and the sharp clarity of a single day blurs into the next, making it impossible to hold on to moments, to claim them as your own. Everything fades, everything slips away, leaving only the patient waiting that is both a prison and a refuge, a place where those who came with fire and noise found themselves silenced by absence itself, a quiet that is so complete it feels like drowning. And the hardest part is not the cold or the heat or the danger from others, but the emptiness that presses in from every side, the loneliness that seeps into the bones and makes the heart ache for something it cannot name, something it can never have here. And so they left, unable to hold on to the fragile thread of existence that the Wild West offered, broken by silence and time, disappearing into the dust that remembers no names and holds no grudges, while I remain, a shadow in the endless landscape, a breath caught between heartbeats, part of the slow, steady unraveling that defines this place, knowing that to live here means not to conquer or to escape, but to surrender, to become one with the patient earth and the silent sky, to find peace not in action, but in stillness, and in that stillness, to become invisible, unheard, forgotten, but somehow, in that invisibility, finding a strange kind of belonging. The sun rises again, casting a pale light that touches the cracked earth and the weathered stones, but it does not bring warmth or comfort. Only a reminder that this cycle has no end, that the same sky watches over the same dust, unchanged and unchanging, while the restless hearts that arrived seeking something new find only the steady weight of absence pressing down on them like an invisible hand. A quiet force that strips away dreams and noise until all that remains is the barest thread of existence. A thin line between being and fading, and in this space, time loses meaning, becoming an endless stretch of moments bleeding into each other, where hope is a distant memory and survival means learning to breathe without expectation, to listen to the wind's mournful song without answering, to find peace not in triumph, but in the slow surrender to the land's patient, unyielding embrace. And those who could not live a day here were those who clung too tightly to the past, to stories and voices and fires that belonged elsewhere, unable to accept the quiet truth that here, in the vast emptiness of the Wild West, life is measured not by what you build or fight for, but by how silently you can endure, how deeply you can become part of the dust and sky, losing yourself until only a breath remains, barely heard beneath the patient stars. The nights come quietly, swallowing the land in darkness that is deeper than any shadow, a silence so complete that even the faintest sound seems loud against the vast stillness. And in this darkness, the mind wanders through memories and fears, searching for meaning in the emptiness but finding none, only the steady, unchanging presence of the land that watches without judgment, indifferent to the struggles of those who tried to live here and failed. Their footsteps erased by the endless wind, their voices lost to the cold stars. And I think about why they could not live a day in this place. It was not the dangers of the wild animals or the threat of strangers, but the absence of everything familiar, the crushing loneliness that seeps into the bones and quiets the heart, the impossible task of existing without the comfort of connection, without the hope of future or the anchor of past. Just a breath held in the vast expanse of nothingness, where time stretches thin and meaning dissolves like dust on the wind, and those who could not bear this weight vanished quickly, their lives folded into the silence like pages torn from a book, leaving behind only the patient earth and the endless sky that remembers nothing and waits forever. The horizon blurs in the heat, shimmering like a mirage that promises relief but offers none, and as the day stretches on, each moment dissolves into the next without distinction, a long, slow fading where the mind loses grip on time and place, where thoughts become whispers lost in the wind and the body feels the relentless pull of dust and silence pressing in from all sides, and in this endless expanse, the need for meaning feels like a cruel joke, a fragile hope that withers under the vast skies in different gaze, for the Wild West is not a place for stories or dreams but for endurance, a quiet, unspoken test of how long one can hold on to existence when everything else slips away, and those who could not live a day here were the ones who held too tightly to their past lives, who sought comfort in memories that could not survive this emptiness, who tried to fight the silence with noise and motion, but the land would not be moved. It would not be conquered, it would only wait, patient and unchanging, until the restless souls either surrendered or disappeared into the dust, their names lost beneath the patient sky, their stories folded into the wind. And I listen to that wind now, feeling its cold breath against my skin, knowing that this place is not for living but for fading, a place where the strongest will cannot save you from becoming part of the endless quiet. The wind whispers across the barren land, carrying with it fragments of forgotten hopes and broken dreams, echoes of footsteps that once hurried but now lie still beneath layers of dust. And in that whisper, there is a story without words, a tale of arrival and loss, of fire burned low and voices silenced, for the Wild West is a place where time seems to stop, where moments stretch endlessly into one another, and the line between day and night blurs into a single thread of quiet waiting, waiting that wears down even the strongest will until all that remains is a fragile breath held against the vast emptiness. And those who could not live a day here were those who feared the silence most, who could not bear the slow unraveling of self in a place where nothing moves but the wind and the dust, where hope is not a flame to kindle but a shadow to endure, a weight to carry in the chest as the land stretches out, infinite and unforgiving, a reminder that here, survival is not victory but surrender, and in that surrender there is a strange peace, not one of joy or triumph, but a quiet acceptance of being small and transient, a breath fading into the endless sky, a shadow melting into dust. The sun sinks slowly beyond the horizon, painting the sky with colors that fade almost as quickly as they appear, and in that fading light, there is a silence so complete it feels like the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for something that will never come, and I sit here, feeling the cool creeping in with the night, the weight of the day settling into my bones, thinking about those who could not live a day in this place, who arrived with dreams too big for the empty expanse, hearts too full of hope for a land that gives nothing back but dust and silence. They tried to fight, to build, to carve meaning out of the endless void, but the Wild West asks not for strength or will but for quiet endurance, a slow surrender to the vast emptiness that consumes everything, and in that surrender lies the truth, that living here is not about conquering but about fading, about learning to breathe without hope, to listen to the wind without answering, to become part of the dust and the sky until even the memory of yourself disappears. And so they left or vanished, swallowed by the patient earth and the endless sky, while I remain, a silent witness to the slow unraveling of all who came before, caught forever in the vast, unchanging song of absence. Night falls with a quiet certainty, folding the land into darkness that is heavier than any weight, a silence so complete that even the slightest sound becomes a sharp intrusion, and in that silence, the mind drifts, wandering through memories like dry leaves on a slow, invisible current, searching for something to hold on to, some thread of meaning to pull against the vast emptiness, but finding only the patient stillness of the land that neither remembers nor forgets, that watches without judgment as dreams unravel and hopes fade like the last light on the horizon. And I think about those who could not live a day here, not because of danger or hunger or thirst, but because they could not endure the profound absence, the overwhelming solitude that presses down like a heavy cloak, smothering the fire within until it is no more than a flicker. And the harsh lesson this place teaches is that survival is not about defiance or resistance, but about quiet acceptance, a slow dissolving into the dust and sky, becoming part of the endless cycle where beginnings and endings lose their meaning. And in that endless waiting, there is both a curse and a strange, somber peace, the peace of knowing that to live here is to become one with the silence, to surrender to the patient earth and the cold stars that watch forever without remembering. The cold night air moves softly across the plains, carrying with it the scent of dry grass and forgotten fires, a reminder of lives once lived, stories told around flickering flames now extinguished by time and neglect. And in this vast, empty space, the mind wanders through shadows and silence, tracing the outlines of those who tried and failed to claim a place in the endless dust. Those who could not live a day here because they sought something the land would never give: comfort, certainty, connection, things that dissolve like smoke under the indifferent sky. And I feel the weight of their absence pressing down like a slow, steady tide, a tide that carries away memories and leaves behind only the patient earth and the endless wind. And in this quiet, I understand that the Wild West is not a place for the strong or the bold, but for those who can embrace the slow unraveling of self, who can surrender their desires and fears to the vast emptiness, becoming part of the dust and sky, part of the silence that stretches beyond time, where living is not an act of defiance but a quiet letting go, a fading breath held until it dissolves into the night. The dawn comes slowly, a pale light that seeps through the cracks of the world, softening the harsh lines of the land but not its endless emptiness. And as the day begins again, there is a quiet heaviness that settles over everything, a reminder that this cycle repeats without change or mercy, that the Wild West is a place where hope is fragile, slipping through fingers like dry sand. And those who could not live a day here were those who clung too tightly to dreams of control and comfort, unable to accept that this land asks not for mastery but for surrender, a surrender to the slow, patient silence that surrounds and consumes, to the absence that fills every corner and every moment with a quiet weight, pressing down until even the strongest will begins to wane. And I sit here, feeling that weight like a second skin, breathing in the dust and sky, learning that living here means becoming part of the vast, unchanging cycle. A single breath in the endless song of the earth and wind, a fleeting shadow, beneath the patient stars that watch forever without answering. The wind carries with it the stories of those who came and left too soon, whispers of laughter and fear, hopes that burned bright for a moment before flickering out beneath the vast, indifferent sky. And I listen to those stories, feeling the weight of countless lives folded into the dust and silence, knowing that the Wild West is not a place for the faint of heart or the impatient soul, but a test of endurance. A lesson in surrendering to the slow unraveling of time and self, where every step forward is met with the quiet resistance of the land itself. And those who could not live a day here were the ones who sought quick victories and loud triumphs, who could not hear the soft, persistent song of the wind that asks for quiet patience and gentle acceptance. And so they vanished, leaving only the faintest traces beneath the endless sky, their stories swallowed by the dust, while I remain, a silent witness to the slow dance of absence and presence that defines this place, caught forever in the quiet hum of the Wild West's eternal breath. The day drifts on without urgency, the sun moving slowly across the pale blue sky as if reluctant to mark time in a place where time seems to lose its meaning altogether, and I sit quietly, feeling the dust settling on my skin, the silence pressing gently like a soft shroud, understanding that to live here is to embrace the absence of noise, the absence of certainty. To become a part of the endless landscape that does not answer questions and does not promise anything, and those who could not live a day in the Wild West were those who could not let go, could not release their need for control, their hunger for stories that make sense, their desire for connection in a place that offers none, and so they walked away or disappeared into the dust, their voices lost to the wind, while I remain, wrapped in the patient stillness, a quiet shadow beneath the vast, indifferent sky, learning that living here means becoming invisible, unheard. A single breath fading softly into the endless quiet. The stars begin to pierce the darkening sky, one by one, cold and distant, silent witnesses to the endless cycle of arrivals and departures, to the countless souls who tried to find a place here but were swallowed by the quiet vastness. And as the night deepens, the wind carries with it a gentle lament, a song of loss and surrender that seeps into the bones and stills the restless heart, reminding me that the Wild West is not a place for those who seek glory or comfort, but for those who can accept the slow fading, the gradual dissolution of self into dust and silence. And those who could not live even a day here were the ones who could not endure the solitude, the absence of answers, the weight of endless waiting, and so they vanish like shadows at dawn, leaving behind only the patient earth and the endless sky, while I remain, a quiet breath in the vastness, part of the slow, unchanging rhythm that has no beginning and no end. The cold wind sweeps across the open plains, carrying with it the silence of forgotten years and the faint echo of footsteps that once hurried but are now gone. And in this vast emptiness, I find myself wrapped in the slow pulse of the land, a rhythm that beats without haste or pause, indifferent to the dreams and fears of those who tried to live here, those who could not hold on even for a single day, broken by the relentless quiet and the overwhelming solitude that presses in like an invisible weight. And I think about what it means to survive in a place where survival is not marked by victory, but by the quiet act of endurance, a slow fading into the dust and sky, a surrender to the patient, unchanging earth that waits for no one. And in this surrender there is a lesson, that living here is not about strength or will but about becoming part of the silence, a breath held softly beneath the endless stars, a shadow melting quietly into the vast, empty night. The first light of dawn creeps slowly over the horizon, softening the harsh lines of the barren land but not lifting the heavy stillness that hangs in the air. And as the world wakes, there is no rush, no hurry to change the endless quiet that defines this place, where time drifts like dust on the wind and moments blur into one another. And I think about those who could not live a day here, those who came with fire in their hearts and noise on their tongues, seeking something to conquer or claim, but found only the patient resistance of the land, the overwhelming silence that swallows dreams and drowns hope. And so they left or disappeared, their stories folding quietly into the vast emptiness like smoke carried away by the breeze, while I remain, a still breath beneath the unchanging sky, learning the slow, steady lesson that here, to live is to surrender, to fade quietly into the dust and wind until even memory loses its hold. The sun climbs higher, its heat pressing gently but relentlessly against the cracked earth, and with each passing hour, the silence grows heavier, wrapping around everything like a thick, invisible cloak, and I sit still, breathing in the dry air, feeling the slow passage of time marked not by clocks or voices but by the steady drift of dust and the soft whisper of the wind. And I think about those who could not live even a day here, those who carried with them the weight of expectations and fears too large for this empty place, who could not find peace in the absence of noise or comfort in the slow unraveling of their own selves. And so they vanished, their footsteps swallowed by the patient land, their names fading into the endless sky, while I remain, learning that to live here is to become a part of the vast, unchanging cycle, a quiet breath held beneath the stars, a shadow melting into dust and silence. The evening falls softly, a cool breeze rising to chase away the lingering heat of the day, and as the sky darkens into a deep velvet sprinkled with stars, I feel the vastness around me, the endless stretch of land and sky that seems to hold nothing but silence and time. And in this quiet, I think about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who tried to tame the untamable, to fill the emptiness with noise and action, but found only the patient resistance of a place that asks, not for struggle but for surrender, for acceptance of absence and stillness. And I realize that living here means learning to be small, to fade gently into the vastness without leaving a trace, to become a quiet breath in the endless cycle of dust and wind. And those who could not do this, who could not let go, were the ones who disappeared quickly, swallowed by the land and sky, their stories erased by the slow, steady hands of silence. The night deepens, and the stars shimmer faintly overhead, distant and cold, and I feel the weight of the endless sky pressing down, a vast emptiness that mirrors the silence stretching across the land. And in this moment, I think about those who could not live a day here, those who arrived full of hope and plans, but who were undone not by danger or hunger, but by the crushing solitude. The relentless quiet that seeps into the bones and stills the restless mind, and I realize that the wild West is a place that demands more than strength or courage. It demands the willingness to become small, to let go of the need for certainty, to accept that living here means becoming part of the silence, a fleeting breath fading softly into the vastness. And those who could not do this were lost, their presence erased by the patient dust and wind, their stories folded into the endless night. The cool air carries the scent of sagebrush and dry earth, a smell that clings to the skin and seeps into the soul, and as the night deepens, the vast emptiness feels like a living thing, patient, watching, waiting without hurry or anger. And I think about those who could not live a day in this place, who arrived with hearts full of dreams but found only the slow, steady erasure of self beneath the unchanging sky. And it was not the harshness of the land or the scarcity of water that broke them, but the quiet, relentless solitude that strips away the layers of noise and distraction until only raw being remains, a fragile breath held against the endless silence. And I sit here now, feeling that silence wrap around me like a second skin, learning that to live here is to embrace absence, to become a part of the dust and wind, a single breath fading softly into the vast, unchanging cycle of the Wild West. The dawn breaks gently, pale light spilling over the horizon, softening the hard edges of the land but not its endless emptiness. And in this quiet morning, the world feels suspended, caught between night and day, life and silence. And I think about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who sought to conquer or escape but were undone by the slow, patient stillness that waits beneath the surface of everything. The silence that is not absence but presence itself, heavy and all-encompassing. And I feel how living here means surrendering to this presence, becoming part of the vast emptiness, letting go of the need for stories or triumphs, and simply being a breath held softly beneath the endless sky, a shadow fading quietly into dust and time. And those who could not do this were lost, their echoes swallowed by the patient earth and the eternal wind. The afternoon sun hangs low and heavy, casting long shadows that stretch across the cracked earth like tired fingers reaching for something just beyond reach. And as the heat slowly seeps into the bones, the silence deepens, filling every empty space with a weight that is both oppressive and strangely soothing. And I reflect on those who could not live a day in this unforgiving land, those who came with restless hearts and hurried steps, who sought to impose their will on a place that answers only in absence and stillness, a place where every breath taken is a quiet surrender, and the slow passage of time erodes even the strongest resolve until what remains is nothing but a fading whisper, a single breath blending into the endless dust. And I remain here, a quiet witness to the patient endurance of the land, learning that to live in the Wild West is to become one with its silence, to accept the slow fading into dust and sky, a quiet breath held beneath the unchanging stars. As twilight slips gently into night, the sky deepens to a soft, endless navy, and the stars begin their silent vigil, scattered like fragile sparks across the vast darkness. And in this quiet moment, I think again about those who could not live even a day in the Wild West, not because they lacked strength or courage, but because they could not endure the profound solitude, the weight of absence pressing down like a slow, relentless tide. And this land demands more than mere survival. It demands surrender, a gentle fading into the dust and silence, becoming part of a cycle that knows no beginning and no end. And so they vanished, their voices swallowed by the patient earth and whispering wind, while I remain, a single breath held softly beneath the endless stars, learning the quiet lesson that here, living is less about presence and more about becoming absence itself. The night air is cool and still, carrying the faint scent of sage and earth, and I sit quietly beneath the vast sky, feeling the slow passage of time marked not by clocks or voices but by the steady breath of the land itself, a breath that holds both absence and presence in a delicate balance. And I think about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who arrived with fire in their eyes but were undone by the slow unraveling of self that this place demands, a quiet fading into the endless dust and silence where the noise of the world falls away and only the patient earth remains. And in that fading there is a lesson, a soft truth whispered by the wind and carried across the plains. To live here is to let go, to become part of the vast, unchanging cycle, a quiet breath, held beneath the indifferent stars, a shadow melting gently into the dust and sky, and those who could not do this simply vanished, their stories lost to the endless night. The first light of dawn peeks slowly over the horizon, painting the sky with soft hues of pink and orange, but the land remains unchanged, silent, patient, and vast, a reminder that here, time moves differently, measured not by clocks but by the slow dance of dust and wind. And I think once more about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who came with dreams of taming the untamable, who sought to fill the emptiness with noise and purpose but were undone by the relentless quiet, the overwhelming solitude that seeps into the bones and stills the restless mind. And in this moment I understand that to live here means to surrender fully, to become a part of the silence itself, a breath fading softly into the endless sky, a shadow dissolving into dust and time. And those who could not do this disappeared quickly, their echoes swallowed by the patient earth and eternal wind. The sun rises higher, its light warm but not harsh, casting long shadows that stretch across the dry, cracked earth like silent reminders of all that has passed and all that remains. And as the day unfolds without hurry or change, I sit quietly, breathing in the stillness that fills this place, feeling the weight of time pressing softly against the skin. And I think again about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who arrived full of hope and fear, expecting to conquer or escape, but who found only the slow, patient resistance of a land that demands surrender, a place where survival is measured not in days or victories but in the quiet endurance of absence and silence. And so they vanish like shadows at dusk, their stories folded into the dust, while I remain, a single breath held softly beneath the unchanging stars, learning the slow, steady lesson that living here is to become part of the endless cycle of dust and wind, a quiet presence fading gently into the vast emptiness. The evening sky fades into soft shades of purple and deep blue, and the first stars begin to twinkle faintly, distant and cold, and I feel the quiet pull of the night wrapping around me like a familiar cloak. And in this stillness, I think about those who could not live a day here, those who came seeking something beyond themselves but were undone not by harshness or danger, but by the vast, unyielding silence that seeps into the soul and erodes the restless spirit. And I realize that the wild West is less a place than a state of being, a place where time stretches and contracts, where presence dissolves into absence, and living means becoming a breath held softly beneath the endless sky, a shadow melting quietly into dust and wind, and those who could not do this faded quickly, their echoes swallowed by the patient land and eternal sky. The wind rises softly, carrying the faint scent of dry grass and earth, and I sit quietly, feeling the slow passage of time marked not by voices or movements but by the steady rhythm of the land itself, a rhythm that beats quietly beneath the endless sky. And I think about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who came with restless hearts and hurried steps, expecting to conquer or escape, but who were undone by the overwhelming solitude, the relentless silence that fills every empty space and seeps into the bones. And I realize that living here is not about strength or courage, but about surrender, a gentle fading into the dust and wind, a quiet breath held softly beneath the vast, unchanging sky. And those who could not do this vanished quickly, their stories lost to the patient earth and whispering wind. The stars burn faintly overhead, distant and cold, and the night air is thick with the scent of sagebrush and earth. And I sit beneath the vast sky, feeling the slow rhythm of time marked not by sound but by the steady breath of the land itself. And I think once more about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who arrived with dreams and plans but were undone not by danger or hunger but by the crushing solitude, the relentless silence that presses in like a slow tide and strips away the noise of the world until only raw being remains, a fragile breath held against the endless night. And in this silence there is a lesson, that to live here is to surrender fully, to become a part of the vast emptiness, a quiet breath fading softly into dust and wind. And those who could not do this disappeared quickly, their stories swallowed by the patient earth and eternal sky. The first light of dawn stretches slowly across the horizon, soft hues of pink and gold washing over the quiet land, and I sit in stillness, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath me, steady and patient, a reminder that this place has endured long before us and will remain long after. And I think about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who came with fire in their eyes, seeking to master the land, but who found only the vast silence pressing down like a weight too heavy to bear. And I understand now that living here is less about fighting and more about yielding, about becoming one with the patient earth and endless sky, a breath fading gently into dust and time, a shadow dissolving into the quiet wind. And those who could not surrender vanished quickly, their stories swallowed by the timeless land and whispering stars. The day stretches on slowly, the sun climbing higher but never hurried, casting gentle light over the endless plains. And in this calm I find myself thinking of those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who came chasing dreams of glory or escape, only to be undone by the overwhelming quiet, the slow, relentless solitude that seeps into the bones and stills the restless mind. And here, in this vast emptiness, I learned that living is less about action and more about surrender, about becoming a soft breath held beneath the endless sky, a shadow melting quietly into dust and wind, and those who could not do this simply faded away, their presence erased by the patient earth and eternal horizon. The evening light dims softly, the sky deepening into shades of blue and purple as the stars begin their slow, silent dance across the vast expanse, and I sit quietly, feeling the cool breeze carry the scent of dry grass and earth, and I think about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who arrived with restless hearts and hurried steps, expecting to tame or escape, but who were undone by the patient stillness, the relentless silence that fills every corner and seeps into the soul. And I realize that living here demands more than strength or courage. It demands surrender, a gentle fading into the dust and wind, a quiet breath held softly beneath the vast, unchanging sky. And those who could not do this vanished quickly, their stories folded into the endless land and whispering stars. The night deepens, and the cool air wraps around me like a soft blanket, carrying the faint scent of sage and dry earth. And I sit beneath the vast sky, feeling the steady rhythm of the land's breath, slow and patient. And I think again about those who could not live a day in the Wild West. Those who arrived full of fire and hope but were undone not by danger or hardship, but by the crushing solitude. The relentless silence that presses in like a slow tide, stripping away the noise and distraction until only raw being remains, a fragile breath held softly against the endless night. And I understand now that to live here is to surrender fully, to become part of the vast emptiness, a quiet breath fading gently into dust and wind. And those who could not do this vanished quickly, their stories swallowed by the patient earth and eternal sky. The first pale light of dawn creeps slowly across the horizon, washing the land in soft pinks and muted golds, and the world holds its breath in that quiet moment between night and day. And I think about those who could not live even a single day in the Wild West, not because they lack strength or resolve, but because they could not endure the deep, unyielding solitude, the vast silence that stretches endlessly, swallowing noise and presence alike. And I realize that this place asks not for loudness or fight, but for surrender, a fading into the dust. And wind, a quiet breath held softly beneath the endless sky, a shadow melting gently into the vast emptiness. And those who could not accept this vanished quickly, their stories lost to the patient earth and whispering stars. The sun climbs higher, casting soft, warm light that stretches lazily over the quiet plains, and in this gentle light, I sit still, feeling the slow pulse of the earth beneath me, steady and unchanging. And I think once more about those who could not live a day in the Wild West, those who arrived with dreams of conquest or escape, but who were undone not by harshness or hunger, but by the patient silence that fills every corner, a silence that seeps into the bones and quiets the restless spirit. And here, in this vast emptiness, I learn that living is less about action and more about surrender, about becoming a soft breath held beneath the endless sky, a shadow dissolving quietly into dust and wind. And those who could not do this simply faded away, their presence erased by the patient earth and eternal horizon. The evening descends slowly, the sky deepening to a muted blue as stars begin to prick the darkness like distant fires, and the cool night air carries the faint scent of sage and dry earth, wrapping around me like a gentle shroud. And I think again about those who could not live a day in the Wild West. Those who came with restless hopes and hurried steps, seeking to master or escape, but who were undone by the slow, unyielding stillness that fills every empty space and seeps deep into the soul. And I understand now that living here demands more than strength or courage. It demands surrender, a quiet fading into the dust and wind, a breath held softly beneath the vast, unchanging sky. And those who could not do this vanished quickly, their stories swallowed by the patient earth and whispering stars.